I'm Laura London, and this is the unfolding of Speaking of Jung. Returning to us today for episode 136 is Jungian psychoanalyst and clinical psychologist Dr. Susan Schwartz in Paradise Valley, Arizona. She earned a master's degree in social work from Boston University before heading to Zürich, Switzerland to train as a Jungian psychoanalyst at the C.G. Jung Institute. She earned a diploma in Analytical Psychology, which is the degree of a Jungian analyst, in 1986, and later went on to obtain a doctorate in clinical psychology from the Jung Institute. For many years, Dr. Schwartz taught developing Jung groups in Poland and South Africa for the International Association of Jungian Analysts, known as the IAAP, and has been a course instructor at both the Jung Institute and the International School of Analytical Psychology, known as ISAP, in Zürich. This year, she will be presenting Echo and Narcissus, the shadows of self-love and self-hate, the fragility of self in the as-if personality, Imposter Syndrome and Illusions in the Mirror, and Love and Narcissism during the summer block for students at the Jung Institute in Küsnacht. Dr. Schwartz has had numerous articles published in journals and as book chapters on topics including fathers and daughters, narcissism, aging, and the Puella Archetype. She has presented at several congresses of the IAAP, including the Dead Mother Effect on a Daughter in Montreal in 2010, Narcissism and Aging in Kyoto in 2016, Narcissism, Psychological Oneness Excluding Love of the Other in Vienna in 2019, Who Am I Really in Buenos Aires in 2022, and will be presenting on narcissism and self-deception at this year's Congress, which will be held in Zurich from August 24th through the 29th. She is the co-author of 2 books, Couples at the Crossroads with Dr. Daniela Rower, and Aging and Becoming with Susan Scott. Dr. Schwartz has also authored 3 books, with a 4th due later this year. Her first book, The Absent Father Effect on Daughters, published by Routledge in 2020, was the subject of our second interview together, episode 76. And her second book, Imposter Syndrome and the As-If Personality in Analytical Psychology, published by Routledge in 2023, was the subject of our last interview together, episode 125. Today, we'll be discussing her latest book, A Jungian Exploration of the Puella Archetype, Girl Unfolding, published by Routledge in December. Later this year, Dr. Schwartz's new book, An Analytical Exploration of Love and Narcissism, The Tragedy of Isolation and Intimacy, will be published by Routledge. Please consider helping Speaking of Jung stay on the air by contributing to our tip jar on Patreon for just $5 a month, or by making a one-time or recurring donation through PayPal. You can find the links in the description box below, or by visiting the support page on our website, speakingofjung.com. You can also help our YouTube channel grow by clicking the thumbs up on this video, or thumbs down, that's for you to decide. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. It's free and it helps us grow. I am also here to remind you of the importance of recording your dreams. Temenos Dream is a revolutionary dream tracking app available for iOS and Android. Now you can record your dreams by speaking into your phone or typing them into the app. Search for myths, legends, and fairy tales related to the themes in your dreams. Use the new advanced AI interpretation with a focus on Jung's work, looking closely at symbols and associations to consider shadow, anima, animus, archetypes, and much more. You can help support Speaking of Jung simply by downloading the app and creating a free account. Unlimited use is available with a premium subscription. Click on the link in the description box below or on our website, speakingofjung.com, where you will find links to everything discussed in this episode in the show notes. This video interview is being recorded on Wednesday, February 12th, 2025, through the magic of StreamYard. Good morning, Dr. Schwartz.
Good morning to you, Laura. How are you?
It's so great to see you again. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, I'm going to thank you, and it's great to see you as well.
So while Speaking of Jung was on hiatus, you released your new book. You and I first discussed your work on the Puella Archetype during our first episode together, which I neglected to mention in the introduction, episode 40, which was recorded back in January of 2019. And you had published a paper on the shadow of the Puella. So that's why I say when I've been promoting this episode that this is your long-awaited book on the Puella Archetype. So would you tell us a little bit about how the book came to be?
Well, it is something that I have thought about for a very long time, actually, way before our interview. And it really was my thesis topic when I was in Zurich. It has evolved a great deal since then, as hopefully I have as well. And I have found through time that most people look on Puella demeaningly.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with the word to find out, but it is demeaning. It's a put down, and it's made diminutive in the psyche. I think it is also interesting that Jung never mentions Puella, and the puer is mentioned certainly by von Franz and James Hillman.
Yeah.
The Puella, absolutely not. I have a feeling it has to do with the approach to women, but the approach to that part of the psyche also is limited to being very young and not continuing through life. And that energy is very helpful through one's entire life. And that is really what I stress in the book.
Mm-hmm. You say that the Puella is a form of the anima, and Jung considered the anima an archetype. So let's break down a little bit of the basics here of what the anima is, what an archetype is, and if there's some listeners that are not familiar with the term Puella, how would you define it for us?
You know, I'm going to go back to something actually that I found and put in the book, and that is the origin of the word puella from the Latin. And it really means a complex combination of things. Maiden, wife, not whore, but a bit of a prostitute in a way. Also very intelligent, not able to marry because she is intelligent, writes poetry, is into literature. So she carries a whole range of qualities. When we align Puella with the anima, we run a little bit into a problem because of how Jung defined anima. If we update the whole story as much as we can, we could say that is an aspect of the personality often associated with the feminine. But then we come to this funny place of what does that really mean? What does the feminine mean? It is not only women, and it's not just men. It's this fluid combination, quite like the Puella herself. So in general, the anima is a quality we all carry, whose definition now I think is in flux, so that we modernize Jungian psychology, which I think is very important.
Mm-hmm. So since we are in kind of in the Jungian theory, we are a mixture of male and female. Would you say that the Puella archetype is also present in men, in males? And we're all kind of changing how we're wording things these days. So how would you let's talk about the qualities of the Puella archetype in females and in males. Am I even allowed to say that anymore? In females and in males?
You know what I oftentimes do? I will say in people, because I think there's also There's also a whole culture of trans, queer
Right.
speak. So it's like, how can we update and keep ourselves current with the world and how we are all changing? So the qualities that I speak about are creativity, energy, edgy, unusual, independent, breaking rules as well, or breaking with tradition, aligned also with the entire arc of life. Again, not just young. Other qualities are not beautiful, self loathing, self denigrating, feeling unable, feeling too young, feeling immature, not able. Can I really unite? Is it okay? Do I have what it takes to be me? But I think that all these questions, even on the downside, are helpful because if you grapple with the questions, it's not that you find answers, it's that you grapple with them.
Yeah.
I think the Puella has the energy to be able to grapple with the things that we need throughout our entire life. One of the qualities I did not mention, and rather purposefully, I think, is the mother.
Mm.
So, does Puella become a mother? Not necessarily, or perhaps. Does she mother herself? I think oftentimes she struggles with that. And mothering oneself can also be the birth of creativity. So
Mhm.
she carries, I think, a wider range than she is usually given credit for.
In the introduction, you mentioned that, and as you said before, that she's often demeaned and described as remaining too young. And I think of that when I see comments about women. She's too old to wear that, or why doesn't she dress her age?
Right.
I become infuriated when I hear that. And let me let you comment on that. What do you think of that?
Well, I relate to being infuriated. And I think that was part of what motivated writing the book.
Mm, yeah.
Because there is something that's very limiting. If you can't wear what you want, act as you want, not offensive, but
Right.
what about edgy? What about different? What about setting some kind of your own self?
Yeah.
It's like, this is me, one's self agency. And I think that the Puella, when she accesses all of her energy, is able to really establish self agency, but not in a traditional way. I
Yeah.
don't know that she has to be traditional or go along with the majority. I think her creativity puts her outside of that, not out of relationship to it, but outside of it, in her own lane. Well, we should all be in our own lane.
Mhm.
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 Yeah.
So is this a question of one who has, quote, "stopped growing," unquote, growth interrupted? Is this the Puella archetype, a woman who embodies the Puella archetype? Is it because of that, of some traumatic event that happened in childhood or in young adulthood, and that at that point she stopped developing?
I think that I'm going to agree with you. We all had traumas that we had to deal with throughout
Yeah.
our lives.
Yeah.
We've all had stops in our development, arrested development. But the other thing is that, what about working to release the stop? So the energy is contained within that arrested development.
Mm.
You open the arrested development, you open the energy. And as you open the energy, your creativity flows. So if you're 109 and your creativity is flowing, you're probably accessing some of your Puella energy. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes.
So that it's a very important aspect. And also maybe, and I think Puella is part of what has been called late bloomers.
Yes.
Why not? Why not? I don't know if they're late. It's just that now the energy is released. And
Mm.
so all the wisdom gained by sitting with the stunted growth or the arrested development, understanding the traumas, figuring out what affected oneself. Also, I'm going to add another twist on this about arrested development. Is it possible that Puella is in our psyche to release us from the transgenerational traps that we have been unconsciously
Mm.
immersed in, so that energy can push through the requirements of how one should be into how one is?
Would you give an example of that?
Yeah, yes, I will.
Mm.
Actually, I just mentioned it in a way. Mother. Well,
Okay.
yes, yes, we all are mothers. Men are mothers. We all have mothers. Do we need to have children to be mothers?
Mm.
It's a very sad statement when people say, and this has been written about for years in the analytic psychological literature, a woman becomes a woman by having a child,
Mm.
and usually a male child in the fairy tales. No, I don't think that's how she becomes herself. She becomes herself by learning who she is, and it is usually through the stuckness of the arrested development, because the again the energy pools, and she's going to have to swim through all of those waves to find herself. Does she need to be a mother at the end? I don't think so, but she does have to mother in the sense of herself,
Yeah.
self-care, and relate. And within that also, we do have to mention the body.
Yes. And you do write a lot about the body in this book, which I really appreciated. Yeah.
I do, and I do it purposefully.
Hmm.
I actually do it in my analytical work as well,
Hmm.
because I find that a lot of people's development gets stuck where they stopped taking care of themselves.
Mm.
Many Puellas struggle with this, and the culture we live in is a very youth-oriented culture. If you're stuck too young, you're not really living your life.
Mm.
And so there's this combination of how do you use your youth throughout, again, through your entire life.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And what would you say is a way we can do that and to not
Mm.
to remain youthful, energetic, playful throughout our lives into midlife, past midlife?
No, I think it's through the entirety of life.
Yeah.
Say the entirety of life. And so again, we come back to the body. How do we take care of our body? How do we
Mhm.
learn? Puella could get too stuck in perfectionism,
Mhm.
and I have to look like so and so and be like so and so, and then she's lost, just lost. When she finds her correct way of caring for herself through the basics: food, sleep, exercise, groundedness. So, one of the issues of Puella classically is she could be too flighty, too ethereal, and not grounded. The body grounds us. We have to face who we are also through our bodies, and our bodies speak. The
Yeah.
body's psychological wisdom. Something goes off, pay attention to it. Use it symbolically to grow and to develop, so that the problem becomes a means of development of oneself. I don't deny the problem or physical difficulties, but they also need to be used for growth and development.
Mhm.
And I believe the Puella has
Yeah.
that kind of energy to be able to cope with some very difficult things. So in that, I don't think she's too young, because I think she has the ability to develop and grow the psyche and the acceptance of the body as well.
And throughout the book, another thing I love about this book is that you do write about the process of Jungian analysis. And that's what this podcast originally, why I started it, was to feature the work of Jungian analysts, to talk about the work we do in Jungian analysis. And sometimes I've strayed from that to incorporate other things in the podcast. It bothers me that I get so many emails asking me, or it's always, you should interview so and so, even though they're not a Jungian analyst. It's like, no, I want to bring it back. And there are a lot of passages in the book that I still want to quote from, because I post quotes on social media, mostly on Twitter, which is now X. And so bringing in, we're talking about the body. What I want to ask you about is in-person analysis, which I did for maybe half of the time. And then I moved to a different city. I was still within driving distance, so I drove 2 hours each way for my analytic hour every week, which was, I mean, it sounds to me now, it sounds crazy, but it was so important. And the physical driving of those 2 hours was also, I felt, part of the process. But then I moved to Chicago and was too far away from my analyst. And so there was no Skype back then. There was no Zoom. So we did it over the phone. And I always felt something was missing because she couldn't see me.
Right.
There was no nonverbal communication. There was no body language. There was no physicalness to the relationship. And I'd also like to ask you about the necessity, which I've been thinking a lot about lately, of the actual physical relationship. And when I say physical, I mean the in-person relationship. And I don't want to diminish. I know that analysis is also being done online, but it is being done in video, with video, so you can actually see each other. So I'm going to let you tell us your thoughts on that.
So a few things. I agree with you. I prefer the in-person, and the Zoom comes in because people live, as you said, too far away. And it's important to provide inner work for people who really want to go deeply into themselves. And my experience, even through the Zoom, has been that people will really stay with and persist in the inner work online. The fallacy of the Puella is that she doesn't commit.
Yeah.
Or she might struggle to commit. But I think it is something about the analyst or the therapist that it is really important to go into, well, could you, why you're not staying, or why you need to leave, or what's going on inside. So to pursue that, is it easier in person? Yes, because we're confronted in a different way with ourselves, because we feel the atmosphere and we are with another in quite a different way. So it's compensatorily through Zoom, and there's value. But I also think that what you'd said about the person to person is the place where we learn to grow. So how, whatever that medium is, we learn to grow as we're open and as we get encouraged to remain and stay. You know, there's something about that, the transferences that go back and forth. And if the transferences are strong enough, somebody will begin to commit to themselves, their body, their psyche, and their being through feeling the interest of the other that even comes through Zoom. The thing I find interesting about the phone is, I would agree with you The phone feels more distant. There is something symbolically about the ear that is supposed to represent a great deal of intimacy through the ear.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, symbolically. And I didn't really find that, but I would always think about that. So I
Mm.
don't know if my thinking about that came across to the people I did phone with, I would hope. And I would oftentimes mention it to again promote intimacy of being together, because it's the intimacy that probably people lacked, and
Yeah.
they were not seen for who they are when they were children. And then we go back to where
Mm.
the development came. One other thing I wanted to add in what you're saying,
Mhm.
which is that the beauty to me of the analytic process is when people are able to go deeply enough, they realize that it is important through their lives to continue going deeply, however they do it. Maybe they do it through reading, through watching videos and YouTube. Maybe they do it in their relationships, but they grab onto the value of their own selves and the meaning of their lives. And I think, especially now in our world, we need that depth approach to realize we are not just going to be buffeted by the winds of whatever is going on.
Mhm. Mhm. You do have a chapter, I'm just looking here, on it's actually in one of the chapters on transference and countertransference, and I just wanna mention that I did receive an email, a very long, and I was a little, not confused, but a little disturbed by, uh, a listener says that they don't have access to an analyst, which anybody in the world with an internet connection does have access to Jungian analysts and the process of Jungian analysis. And they said that they are using AI as
Oh,
an analyst. And I didn't want to share what I was really thinking. Everybody's on their own path, but I don't remember what I responded. I hope I was kind, but it also ties into what I've been thinking lately, this phrase, "All logos, no eros." You can't have a relationship with AI, or can you?
no, you know, I don't think so. You don't have a relationship with AI, you have information.
Yeah.
And the question is, where is that information coming from?
Yes.
And it does not have a personal touch.
Mhm.
It has a computer touch. So it might be correct as far as its facts go, but I'm not even sure about that.
Right.
And I'm really not sure. And
Right.
I would say that it's very important, especially now, to say, and this relates to social media itself, be true. Be true to yourself and be real. Even you said you put quotes on your social media,
Yeah.
but they and I know that they are. They're deeper quotes. They're reflective quotes. They relate to relational issues, people issues. AI is not a person.
Mhm.
The more we realize that and that there is a huge difference, the better off we are. There is another thing about that person, whoever they are that you were speaking about. People oftentimes will say, "I can't afford it."
Right. I
What
hear
they
that
are,
a lot.
yeah, well, that's probably what the AI is. It's less expensive.
Mm.
However, none of us can really afford it. But the other side is, how can you not afford it?
Yeah.
Because your entire life is going to be enriched it as you do it. So no free lunches. That's a fact of reality, right? There's reality. No free lunch. Pay for it and become who you are.
Yes.
I don't think you can become who you are with AI.
Mhm.
the issue about why I also, in the book, of course, speak about transferences, and I put it that way, is the presence of both people relationally. If I'm not there totally, totally as I can be, and consciously as I can be,
Right.
how can I expect that other person to appear? And so our relationship develops something in between. Jung often speaks about this, the transcendent function.
Yes.
It's something else. And the something else to me is the growth, not just between us, but the growth of that person. So that this is what happens as we move out of our arrested development through relationship. And that's what you're saying. You can't get a relationship with AI. So how far are you going to grow?
And it also takes us out of the body.
Totally.
AI has no body, and you do mention a lot, as I said in the book, about the body. And I was just scrolling through my notes here, because there were some really brilliant phrases here. The self detached from corporeal, I always struggle with that word, corporeal reality.
Right. Well, that I think is an abbreviated way of asserting and saying one of the challenges of Puella. She can be detached.
Yeah.
A lot of people live from the head up. They have no idea what's going on with the rest of their body. And the trick, I think, if that's the right word, is for the analyst to be able to recognize the lie that the person has told themselves about themselves. And the lie is, I'm only up here. I don't really exist on the ground. And it's a dangerous place because then you won't recognize what you need and what you're lacking. And so that body sense in all aspects of life is incredibly important. And to stay embodied is oftentimes a very difficult thing to do.
Yes.
24/7, you can't do it because, we need to space out. But how much you spend within yourself, concentrated, focused, honoring. I see so many people, we could say Puella types. They don't look like they didn't look in the mirror, but they didn't look in the mirror. Symbolically, they didn't look at themselves. They didn't look at themselves. They just, did their hair.
Yeah.
But they didn't see who they are. That's in a deeper way. And that is, I believe, what the Puella drags us into, because many people don't want to have an entire vision of who they are, and they don't see themselves the way they are. And you have to be realistic about who you are, in the flaws and in the marvelous aspects for life. You have to have we have all. And the acceptance of all of these aspects is what the Puella actually can lead us to, but could lead us away from as well.
You mentioned up in your head and up in the air, and it's just reminding me of, there was a movie with George Clooney. I don't think it was a very popular movie. It was titled Up in the Air, and they screened it at the Jung Center in Evanston, which is just north of Chicago. There used to be once a month a movie night on Friday nights, and it was Dr. Mary Ellen O'Hare Lavin, the wife of the now late analyst, and speaking of Jungian, Tom Lavin. She facilitated the discussion after, and it was about the puer. And George Clooney played the character in the movie who was always up in the air. He was always traveling, and it's a great movie, and some of it was filmed here in Chicago. But anyway, I forgot what I was going to say now. And the mirror and the analyst as a mirror. And when I do get a lot of listeners, and also on social media, because I do now I'm able to do these long form quotes because I pay for the premium subscription on Twitter. So I can post several paragraphs. I mean, actually several pages, and I do. And my fear was always that, and I do hear this from people, that they read Jung and they read books and there's something missing. And I don't want to just keep talking about this, but I think that this is really solidifying this for me, that there is something missing when we don't work with another, a mirror. We can't see ourselves when we're just reading a book.
True. So there's several things in what you said. The mirror with the other is also the mirror with the others inside. And this is where the Puella has a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
Because the aspects that are not wonderful, she doesn't want to look at.
Mm-hmm.
That's true of all parts. The challenge is to really, it's not just accept who you are. It's not just like who you are. It's be who you are.
Be.
Exactly. And it means you can't do everything, and you're not going to be marvelous at everything, and not everyone will love you. So here's the dangers of the Puella wanting all of this. I think there's another part in what you're saying as well. Our culture promotes, even more now, is promoting an isolationistic through the phone, right? You have the phone, you go anywhere and everyone is on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's rather isolationistic approach to life. That can be a way of not being mirrored. There's no mirror. Where's the mirror? The phone is not going to make the mirror. And the mirror we want is an accurate one. Not always saying you're wonderful and I think you're great, and not always saying you're not wonderful, but accessing a real mirror and liking enough of what you see there. Mirrors are such an amazing symbol for life and for being, and really, again, seeing who you are. The only way to do it is with another, inside, outside. Can you become yourself by reading a book and not doing inner work with another? It's a little like doing it with AI.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get information, which is marvelous, but how are you going to use it? How are you going to express yourself? How are you going to put yourself out into the world in a creative, impactful way? Impactful. I don't mean reaching 10 zillion people, but the impact and the intent of being in a related way in the world is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Yes.
When you were talking about mirrors, it reminded me of when I first started Analysis, and it just seems so long ago. It was a long time ago. It was the early 1990s. My analyst's office had a waiting room, and in the waiting room on the walls were all these little mirrors, different shapes and sizes. And I remember always thinking, what are all these mirrors doing in here?
There you go.
Right?
Yes. But in relation to the mirror, I think one of the aspects that is also incredibly important for Puella, who can very much get away with an exterior facade and everyone thinks she's fine. But when you go into analysis, the process is, it's not that you're not fine. It's just that sometimes you're not. And to get that honest feedback that, yeah, you're right, that wasn't the right thing to do, or that wasn't okay, or is there something else you could have done, expands the personality because of the honest response. The responsibility when you are in a one-to-one relationship and an inner work relationship, to be very honest and very clear, so the person realizes who they are and how they're coming across.
Yes. Yes. And I'm trying to, I was watching back one of the episodes I did. And while my guest was talking, I was looking at my notes for the next thing to say. And I didn't like how it looked like I wasn't paying attention to my guest, but I don't know how else to go back and forth between my guest and the notes, because I pulled some things from this book that are wonderful. And you do have a chapter titled The Empty Chair, and you point out something and you word it so beautifully. You say, when the possibility of a real relationship emerges, like the analytical one, the dead parent, which we haven't gotten into, zooms in and a black hole opens. Sharon Waldron writes of what is needed to escape the black hole. What is necessary is an actual person to absorb the projection, not a two-dimensional flat production that cannot interact. The undeveloped core of the patient's self needs to be allowed to emit itself from its incarceration inside the black hole to counteract the massive power of the absence at the heart of the abyss. And we didn't talk about how the other absorbs the projection, and that's not possible without the other.
That is true. So in reference to the empty chair, the empty chair is the chair that is I say this in the chapter, it's a chair that is in my office. And it is that a person, well, many people identify with empty chairs as containing aspects of themselves that are sitting across from them and that they see, even though they're not actually there, but they see the possibility within the emptiness. What Andre Green, French psychoanalyst, speaks about when he's talking about the dead parent, oftentimes he talks about the dead mother. You could say the negative mother complex, or the father, negative father complex, or the void, is a person who has experienced the parental figures as not there. They're not there physically or emotionally. They are preoccupied. They are depressed. And these are the things that people will work out in the analytic process. The Puella, probably in many ways, has experienced a certain deadness in the parental story. It translates into a deadness inside. And that in turn translates into trying to save the dead parent. And that in turn distances the Puella from herself. So she is busy trying to make the dead parent come alive, which she cannot do. And then she's far away from who she is. What she sees in the empty chair is her potential. The dealing with the void is what I'm talking about, but it is something that both people in the analytic process will come to recognize. So it's not just that myself will absorb the void or that person will absorb it. It is the void will come out between us and we will find a way into it to fill it. What I love about Andre Green and also the positiveness of Jung is that the absence is there or the negativity is there to be filled, to be transformed, and to be changed. So I'm going to jump a bit, but I think Puella, through her life, has that challenge and energy to fill it. She needs guidance, but we all do. We all do. From the dead parental story, it's a seriously dead place, not alive, not with that energy and zest that we need through our lives. So if we are guided with another person to go into it, we don't have to be afraid of it anymore. And it won't take on an overwhelming kind of issue so that we cannot deal with it, and it flattens ourselves. If you think about it, every fairy tale, every princess always leaves. It's usually a kingdom. It's not a queendom. But she leaves that patriarchal father overriding story, goes on her own to establish her own. And that is, she starts out young, representing Puella, you could say.
Yeah.
Throughout it, she matures. It doesn't mean she has to leave Puella. It's just that she matures along with who she has been.
Earlier, and just in the interest of time, and so we need to jump around.
Yes.
Earlier, you mentioned Marie-Louise von Franz, and when you were talking about the mother, and I had done an episode very early on in the podcast. This is the 10th year of Speaking of Jung. I had done it very early on, and this analyst said, you can't individuate until you become a mother, something like that. And I was stunned, and I never aired that episode. I'm not a mother. Marie-Louise von Franz is not a mother.
No. And what is interesting is that Jung was a father, and he wrote one essay on the father. So does one have to be an actual parent? No, actual parents learn something different than people who decide to not be actual parents. But we are born with a creative urge.
Yeah.
Some people manifest it in one way and some in another way. I think what's interesting, what you did, and of course we have to do this, we eliminate things that don't work for us. One of the things that the Puella energy would want to eliminate is a dead parent and fill it with an alive one inside oneself.
Mm-hmm. Another thing about von Franz that I want to mention is that currently her collected works are being published by Chiron Publications, and the latest volume to get released is volume 10 on the puer. And there is a whole section on Speaking of Jung's website on the collected works of Marie-Louise von Franz. So she wrote extensively. I think extensively. It's a huge volume on the puer, the Puella Archetype. And so I was wondering how you saw any differences, I don't know, between the puer and the Puella. Is this an even exchange? Are they equal? Are they on par? No, because a puer's relationship with his mother, I mean, you can't say that's exactly a Puella's relationship with her father.
No, I don't think they're on the same par, because probably throughout history, and who knows into the future, but people of the female sex get raised differently than people of the male sex. So I don't think there's exactly an equal exchange because of culture. But also because of culture, people in one culture, in our United States culture, are raised differently than people in, say, the Russian or Chinese or African cultures.
Yes.
So there's that to pay attention to and really be aware of. I mention culture throughout because I think it's quite important.
Yeah.
But I also think there's something about the other side, and James Hillman disagrees with Marie-Louise von Franz, and that it is just the mother. So is a puer just a mother's son? I don't think so. I do think there is a lack of father in both of them.
Yeah.
And they both suffer from that. The Puella, and I have examples of that in the book, oftentimes does not have a mother she can identify with for a variety of reasons. the mother might be, the Puella might, I don't know, want to have 10 degrees. Maybe the mother doesn't care about that. Or the Puella looks a different way than the mother.
Yeah.
Or she puts the mother down and the maternal down in for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's not even because of the mother. Maybe it's because the father denigrates the mother. And so the Puella learns from the father to put the mother down. They're all involved.
Interesting.
They're all involved. That's what I'm trying to say. And they all have an impact. Who raises us has an impact on who we are. But how those people were raised impacts how they're going to raise us, so on and so on and so on. I think that's an important piece. And I do mention that about the transgenerational effects, as well as how do we break out of the traditions that we all are trapped by. Because we're trapped by them. But you can't escape it. You just say, where's that edge that I need to push?
You quote Jung in the book here, throughout the book. I pulled this one out. He said, "It has always seemed to me that I had to answer questions which fate had posed to my forefathers and which had not yet been answered. Things which previous ages had left unfinished."
Right. And Jung, of course, goes back to the Middle Ages. I mean, he really goes back into
Sure does.
identifications. But we all have something that is beyond us or before us that we are carrying. I think it's important to recognize that we're carrying some aspects we're never really going to understand, maybe for a variety of reasons. And there are influences upon us that are not just located in the individual family to which we were born. I think we get caught a little bit in the gene pool of the parents had this, therefore I will. I don't think so. I think things they skip around, and we all are born with quite a different little spirit or big spirit. And we have to access that ourselves differently than how we were raised, knowing that we are still trapped by it. So it's that fine line of having, again, the energy and creativity, the verve and the courage to really move beyond what we were slotted into.
And to tap into our potential.
Exactly. That, to me, thank you for saying that. There is hope and potential in the Puella archetype and every aspect of our lives. It's how do we use it? The hope and potential is in that empty chair.
Yeah.
And that's partly why I wrote that chapter, because it was actually an experience of someone. And it was very seriously taken. In the emptiness is our potential and hope to fill it.
Well, we're coming up on toward the end of our time together today, and I wanted to leave some room and for me to ask you about another book that you'd written that I just found out about,
Yes.
and I'm very excited about. It's titled An Analytical Exploration of Love and Narcissism, The Tragedy of Isolation and Intimacy. And I think you referenced that a little earlier in our talk today when you were talking about isolation. But this is about isolation and intimacy. And you're looking at narcissism, which is a topic that I find very interesting. I know that there is a lot of material out there online about narcissism, and that Jung did not use that word specifically, but it doesn't matter. It's not that concept does not apply here, and I'm going to let you tell us what you found and how you apply it as an analytical psychologist.
So I'm going to relate it to, excuse me, the other books that I've written, and all of them mention narcissism.
Yeah.
They all address it because each of the aspects that I'm talking about have a narcissistic piece. The Puella, I'll go back to, could get too stuck in a singularity and not unite and not commit.
Okay.
The complexity of narcissism and the complexity of love, really, it is tragic. It's also intimate, and it's also isolationistic.
Mm.
And I liked bringing together these rather opposite pieces because I think the challenge of our lives, as we were mentioning AI, social media, is intimacy and
Yeah.
real. The narcissist, like all the different pieces we've been discussing, could tend to facade and not
Mhm.
because of the fear of being real.
The fear of being real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's what I would say, and that's part of what brought forward the idea to write on narcissism and love, as well as how many people I have heard in my office say, so and so's a narcissist.
Yep.
What does that mean? I
I
always
hear that a lot too. Yeah.
what does it mean? Oh, they some stereotype that comes out.
Hmm.
What we have been talking about is looking in depth. And so in the book, I look at Narcissus and Echo, another figure who hasn't gotten too much press.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Well, I hope that you'll come back and we can discuss that book. I think that I know that we discussed it in our previous episodes, the concept of narcissism, and this looks like a very in-depth exploration.
yes,
And so I hope that you'll come back and we can talk about that. So I see the publication date is July 16th of this year from
yes,
Routledge.
yes,
Mhm. And you will be presenting at this year's Congress, which will be held in Zürich.
mhm,
It is Jung's 150th birthday, basically. And I know that there are several events that are going to be happening in Zurich to commemorate that, which I will be talking about and discussing and promoting. So look out for that. Is there anything you wanted to mention? Anything else you have coming up?
Well, yes, after that one is a book on fathers and sons.
Ah,
But
great.
again, it's the missing father. And this is part of our culture. So what I would say is thank you again for having me. And all of the writings relate to not just what we do relationally in the office, but what happens relationally in the world.
Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you, Dr. Schwartz.
Thank you.
Speaking of Jung is not just a podcast, it is also a website. Please visit speakingofjung.com, where you will find extensive information on the life and work of C.G. Jung, show notes and audio downloads for all of our 158 episodes, a comprehensive books page, a blog, and now a monthly email newsletter, which you can sign up for at the bottom of our front page. All of our episodes are also available on YouTube podcasts, which you can access by subscribing to this channel, Jungian Laura. It's free. Just click the subscribe button below. I created Speaking of Jung almost 10 years ago. This year is our 10th anniversary, and all of our content is still free to access, but it is not free to produce. Please consider contributing to our tip jar on Patreon for just $5 a month, or visit our support page at speakingofjung.com/support for links on all the ways you can help keep this podcast and our website alive. With special thanks to the extraordinary staff at Routledge, I'm Laura London, and you've been watching The Unfolding of Speaking of Jung.